I'm June McAtee. This is my sister Margie Brown, and we're the daughters of Bernie Venus, who um, is a descendant of the Manitoban expedition. Her mother was a 15-year-old girl who came on the Manitoban with her family. She was the eldest child of Nils Persson Sarah and Inger Maria Sarah. And the whole family, or much of the family, at least the younger children at that time, immigrated with their parents to during the Alaska Reindeer Project that Sheldon Jackson organized to teach reindeer herding to Inuit peoples in western Alaska. So they were part of that family. They made the journey across the Atlantic and traveled across the U.S. by train to Seattle and then on a boat again, and eventually ended up at the reindeer station, the Eaton Reindeer Station on Seward Peninsula. So, of course, our mother has informed us over the years and has actually written down information that she learned about her family history, and both from her family and also from her own research, because she was curious. She knew a little from her family, but not a great deal, and so she collected information and documented, and we discovered a lot of documentation in the government archives about our family because they were part of the Reindeer Project. So over the years, she has written to some of her relatives, and both in Kautokeino and also in Alta. And so we made this trip. We were invited to participate in the Manitoban reunion, and we made the trip over and got in touch with relatives on both sides of my mother's family. So obviously, she had Sami background, you know, and we knew sort of the very sketchy details of the story, but a lot of the detail, I think, she learned as an adult herself.
Mm-hmm.
She said that her family did not talk a great deal about their experiences, at least to their children. I believe they probably talked about it a lot between themselves because they all experienced it. But when you experience something like that, it's very difficult to communicate that to people who don't even know what you're talking about, you know. And that's often the sense you have when you talk to your children. Their experience of life is so different from yours because it's generational, and it's very difficult to explain to a child all those things that happen to you. As an adult, I think you have more understanding of, can apply your imagination to what that experience must have been like. There were individual stories. Of course, my grandmother was 15 at the time. She was a child. And what my mother remembers are the stories that her mother told her about how Americans experienced this event and how they were so curious about these people. They were curiosities, and people would collect along the train route to see them because no one had seen reindeer and no one had seen Samis. And she said that people would come up and touch their clothing, you know, and because it was so unusual. You know, they were just totally curious, you know. It was so unlike anything else in America, you know. So my mother remembers hearing that from her mother. Yeah, and
what happened?
explosive growth in Alaska. There were reindeer everywhere, basically, in western Alaska. But unfortunately, there was no market. This was a program that was designed to assist the indigenous people. And it was kind of a wide open situation. There were opportunities for people to make money. And I believe that the Sami people were actually induced to go to Alaska because it was billed as an economic opportunity for them to herd reindeer in a new place, and that was part of the reason that they went. You know, maybe a large part of the reason that they went. but the reindeer, it wasn't really an industry. It wasn't commercialized. So there was a lot of product, but there was no market for it. There was the only people that really needed the reindeer were the miners, and that was a fairly small group of people in Alaska. So there was far more supply than there was demand, and that depressed the whole industry. But also, it became apparent that people who stood to make money from it were not the Alaska Native people, who were not really capitalists at heart, and so it became obvious that white people were going to have control of this business if it became a business, and that was not what was intended originally. So then were political moves made to restrict the ownership of the deer, so that white people wouldn't end up owning all the deer. So the Reindeer Act of 1937 was passed, and that restricted ownership to Alaska Native people, and that was really the end of reindeer herding for the Alaskan Sami, because they were included in the broader category of white owners, because they were not recognized to be indigenous people. They were not indigenous to Alaska, and this whole project was designed for the indigenous people of Alaska. So they were caught in the middle. So they were promised when they came to Alaska they would be treated like white people, and ultimately they were treated like white people, including disenfranchisement from the herding business. So that was part and parcel of it. Well, of course, it's the first trip for us, and our experience is Alaska, so we're always looking for comparisons and contrasts to what we know. So we see a lot of the same species, but we see other things that are very different. For instance, the first thing we noticed coming to Alta was the pine trees, because there aren't any in Alaska except in the extreme southern part of it. So this was very unusual to us to see pine trees here. We have spruce and birch, and that's similar. And the country around Kautokeino is very similar to the country in the interior of Alaska. So it looks very familiar to us, so we're very much at home here. It's been very interesting to see.
Well, and of course on a personal level, we have heard, particularly as June said, as our mother studied her own heritage, heard over the years of our Sami heritage, and so the idea that we could come back, particularly at this time when so many people are gathering, has been a thrill for us, and June and I have been excited about it and looking forward to it for months since we heard about it and got the invitation to come. And so we have come from a family who's been proud of their Sami heritage. We know of Faith Fjeld, who is now living in Alaska and has worked, publishes the Baiki, and has worked on exhibitions of Sami materials that we have contributed, our family has contributed to. And she describes a situation much differently for her, where she was not told she was Sami until she was an adult, and it wasn't something that was shared proudly in the family. That was not the case with us. In fact, the first time we met her, we saw her giving a talk about how Sami people needed to be proud of their heritage. They didn't need to be ashamed of it anymore. And we raised our hand and we said, "What are you talking about? Because we have always been proud of it, just as we have been told of our Yupik Inuit heritage." And so it has not been something that has been hidden from us. It has not been something that we have been ashamed of. It's something that we have been taken great pride in, even if we didn't know the culture or had never been reindeer herders ourselves. it was something to be proud of, because it was such an unusual and special heritage. So we come from a family who has not been afraid to talk about the heritage and to study it and to admit it. And so the idea that we could come back here in the midst of it to the country that where our grandmother came from, I think is just, it'll be something we'll remember for the rest of our lives.